Yes, so Hairless here. Today we're back with a patron request. Thank you to Cara for this one. This is a song called Canto A Elegggua, performed by a group called Sexto Sentido. That name means sixth sense in Spanish. They're a Cuban group. In the description it says it's a song of the Yoruba religion dedicated to the Orisha Elegggua. So I went and googled the Orisha Elegggua, and it is a deity from the Yoruba religion. The opener of doors, the deity of destiny and communication, apparently. The lyrics are a chant or a prayer invoking the blessings of the Elegggua. So I'm thinking this might be quite a spiritual performance, or perhaps introspective or something like that. Religious music is usually respectful and insightful. It's an a cappella performance performed by a group of women. I'm told it's full of very scrunchy chords, very tight harmonies. Usually that's my cup of tea, so let's get straight into it and find out.
Bara, alo yureso que boda. Omonia la wana mama Kenya irawo Barasuayo Omonia la wana mama Kenya irawo O barasuayo Eke Eshodara Omonia la wana mama Kenya irawo Barasuayo Omonia la wana mama Kenya irawo O barasuayo
Ooh, okay, that's a bit of a change. We've got some body percussion, claps. It was quite a while before we got any harmony, mostly unison singing at the start. But then when we got that harmony, it was certainly right what I'd heard about the scrunchy chords, and so in tune as well. So tight with each other. Yeah, we're about halfway through. We're going to do a pause now, go over and analyse what we've heard so far, because there's some really interesting things going on there, both rhythmically and in terms of harmony. If you don't want to hear any analysis, go to the timestamp. Firstly, I love the setting, how relaxed and cool. So simple, them just sitting there. It's clear that the music is what we'll be focusing on. There's no flashy sets or crazy makeup or colourful costumes. I mean, it's in black and white, even to remove the colour element from this. The colour we will be seeing, or hearing rather, will be in the music itself. So the opening melody, one singer. It's made up of 3 notes in contrary melodic arcs, so we're moving it both up and down, ending the first phrase 1 note below the starting note. And then we go up again on the next phrase and then down much lower. It's quite sporadic. Now, I don't really want to say the next bit, but I feel I have to, because it could be perceived as negative. So if you do perceive what I'm about to say as negative, please don't. And I'll explain why. I'll preface by saying again how impeccable their tuning as a group is, which in a cappella singing is really all that matters. As long as you all move a bit up together or a bit down together, it will be a tight sound, and that's exactly what we've been hearing, a very, very tight sound. That sporadic move to the lower register of the first singer that we just heard, that is causing her to deviate a tiny bit away from the true pitches of those notes. Her last 2 notes there were these. Let's listen again and compare the true pitches. And when I say true pitches, it's just like this is a C, as defined by Western musical standards, as most people will refer to that as a C due to the frequencies. So we can see that she's a bit sharp, she's above the note. So she's kind of in between these two notes. So the tuning has moved up a little bit. What does this mean? Well, because of how tight they are as a group, it means absolutely nothing at all. If we'd somehow gone 2 or 3 notes in either direction, then maybe it would matter, because the upper part and the lower part, they'd be hyper extended at their respective ends, and it might be a bit more difficult for them to sing. But moving only in between the current note and the next note, in between there is like a quarter tone. That's not really noticeable in general. Personally though, I do think it's noticeable in a cappella singing, just because of how important spot on tuning is. Alright, so that's the negative part aside. Why I'm mentioning it is because when the other singers then come in, they come in unison on the same note. All of them are in tune with each other, which means that they have adapted to this slight tonal shift. It shows how tight they are as a group. And especially when we get to the harmony a bit later on. This is such a ridiculously tight performance that no doubt there will be people questioning the legitimacy of it maybe, how much pitch correction is used, all those kind of things. The fact that this unison note, or these unison notes that we're hearing now, they are slightly varied between each singer. The sound is slightly different between them, but overall it's this raw sound. It could have been brushed up a little bit in post-production, just to make it sound a bit better, but to me it's an authentic sound. And I love that. I love how we can hear the different voices and the different voice types of each of the singers. They have a slightly different way of singing to each other. Slightly different vowel sounds. Some using a little bit of vibrato, others not. These kind of things. Usually with a cappella, I think the tightest performances are those where the voices are sort of indistinguishable from each other. Just this massive sound. This is a different style. It's, how do I say, more natural sounding. Again, I'm going to use the word raw, authentic. So we get our first bit of harmony, nearly a whole third way through the song, almost a minute in. This performance, from what I've seen so far, is top-notch, proper close harmony singing. Close harmony is a kind of sub-genre of a cappella music. This is a great example of it. All the parts are in fairly similar ranges to each other. The first bit of harmony we hear, with harmonies as tight as this, it becomes a bit less obvious what the chord is, by name anyway, like F or C. The number one thing for defining a chord are the notes that make up the chord. It's kind of like a formula. I know that the notes C, E and G will make up a C major chord. But the number two thing, which is often overlooked in terms of significance, I think, is the musical context. In this context, let's say, for example, that I feel this chord as a variant of an F minor chord. We've got a 9/8 suspension in this G, but it doesn't move and we have both notes already there. And then at the bottom we have this C sharp or D flat thrown in the bass part or the lower part to clash with the top note. If we move them together, if we take that root note, the F, and play it just with the bottom note, that's this diminished fourth interval. Diminished fourth is also the same as a major third, which is now a C sharp major chord. But what we hear and the context is completely changed. So is this C sharp and not F? We can all agree it's a tense chord. Add in the top note. It's spaced out evenly, but also with clashes. The inner parts are clashing, the outer parts are clashing with each other. No one part is more important than any other part. Then the next line split into two groups for 2-part harmony. We get a blended voice in the lower two voices. So the lower part and the upper part, the upper two voices, they're singing in their head voice. So the voice types themselves become an additional layer of division. As for the rest of the line, this is how it goes. We start off moving in thirds, jump down, jump back up to different notes, jump down again to different notes. Top part has replaced the bottom part's previous note, then the juicy chord, and then the second juicy chord. And here is the sheet music if you're interested. I particularly like the motion of the upper part moving down whilst the other parts don't. The top part in these two notes is duplicating these two notes. Then all of the parts slide down for the second chord The top part, it's moving upwards in the opposite direction, taking over the note sung here to give a feeling of no change. As for the rhythms in this, there's no beat as we've noticed, everything seems quite free rhythmically speaking, very kind of flowy. The music, I suppose, is in 6/8. I've talked about this in a few of my recent videos actually, but basically we can think of that as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So 2 main beats in a bar or a measure, each of them being 1, 2, 3. Here, the next bit, you'll see it sounds like a hemiola, which is 3 beats played in the space of 2. Chum, 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 instead of ch, 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 ch. Because instead of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, these notes are 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So there's a lot of rhythmic flexibility available through the use of this time signature of 6/8. I think it helps to create a very free feel to all things rhythmic in this performance so far. And it's just these really peculiar homophonic chord movements. So everyone's singing the same words at the same time in the same rhythms as each other in parallel motion. Don't worry, this does take me a few listens to make sure of all the parts. The harmony is very tight. And then just before we pause, again, we get this 2 and 2 divide. This time though, it's 4-part harmony, not 2, and the rhythms now being an additional layer of division. 2 of the parts are static, the other 2 are moving. Harmonizing within their groups of 2 as well. So there's a lot going on, even though it might seem like there isn't. Let's carry on. I think this would be a fun one to listen to a few times, each time focusing on a different part or line. Wow. This is one I can imagine people could have mixed views on this song just because of how scrunchy some of those harmonies were. The second half as well, very different to the first half, but also very similar. Yeah, really interesting, really interesting. Let's go over some of what we've heard in the second half. The obvious change from where we carried on, they now have some sort of rhythmic drive through clapping. The claps are interesting as well. So those claps. That's what they're doing for the most part. They are those 2 main beats we spoke about earlier, where each one of them is comprised of 1, 2, 3. So basically they're pretty much the simplest beat you can have. But when done against the melodies and counter melodies they're singing, it all starts to sound quite complex. A bit more rhythmically unstable, perhaps. No, that's the wrong term. It's now a bit less obvious what the underlying rhythmic structure is. Or at least less obvious than we might expect it to be. Now we have a regular beat. Speaking of the melodies and counter melodies, we get unison melody and then counter melody. The first counter melody, that's just 1 line. But then the second one, that's now 2 lines. And then we go back to 1 line. That was a nice chord there on Asche, is it they're saying? Asche, Asche. Harmonically it's nice, but also there's something else quite different or strange about this particular Asche, because they've said that term quite a few times. And that's to do with the rhythms. Let me quickly just write them up. So previously when we've heard it, it's Asche, with the first part, the A, is coming before each new measure. So of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 beats in the bar or measure, it's the last one. This time though, it comes in on the first beat of the new bar or measure. Very subtle way of adjusting the rhythms and just making things seem a little bit off, or as though they have a bit less regularity to them. Alright, and then that moves into this part. The part that stood out most to me was the one that's moving down chromatically, perhaps because it was doubled. It's going, and then I'm expecting it to continue, but instead so that one line, which has a really important harmonic role, it's split into these two chromatic inflections. And the top part that we hear above that second chromatic inflection, that's kind of jumping all over the place. Quite the opposite to chromaticism, which is step-by-step movement. That again moves into these funky chords, which then go into unison. So I'm thinking, okay, we're starting a unison section again. Nope. Straight back into these scrunch chords. That is extremely scrunchy, kind of bordering on atonal. So I can understand if this particular bit doesn't appeal to some people. What we're hearing, these are the 3 notes underneath the top part, the 2 outside notes of this chord, which are the 2 easiest to hear. This is a tritone, otherwise known as the devil's interval, due to its dissonant nature. And then with the middle part, and then the top part is going. So no matter how we kind of dissect these chords, they're just built in such a scrunchy way. Then again, we get the scrunchy chords repeated over and over. And then there's this lower part that comes in as a drone. I find that particularly interesting because now we've got all these cross rhythms and syncopations coming in the claps. The claps, all 4 of them with their own pattern, put them together and we get these proper cross rhythms, this rhythmic energy, constant movement. There's constantly some sort of percussive sound that we're hearing. The drone note, just one sung note, not doing anything, that could not be more different from all these claps going on. Again, it might be fun to watch each one of them one at a time and try and focus on their claps and how they contribute to the overall rhythmic sound. So that section repeats towards the end, and then it finishes with this sort of harmonic resolution. The lowest part, it goes down to here, which is the starting note of the next unison bit. And then this calm ending. Yeah, the arrangement, the harmonies, the execution, the performance in and of itself, they can't be faulted, really. I guess it comes down to personal preference, how much you might enjoy this performance, because it is quite intense. The more extreme parts are really, really scrunchy. If you've watched my videos before, you'll know that I do love a good juicy chord, scrunchy chord. There were a couple in here that were bordering on the extreme even for me. Still though, what a tight performance. They clearly understand each other's voices so well. They're tuning with each other spot on. There were imperfections, which I always like because it does point towards it being an authentic sound, a more natural, raw sound. Overall, very, very interesting one to discover. So thank you again for this request, and thank you to everyone for watching. Would appreciate a like and subscribe. If you enjoy my content, want to support me, join the community and vote on future polls, you can do so by joining the YouTube membership or Patreon linked below, and I will see you next time.